year I was watching Euphoria and I came across this scene. Frantically, I googled this Y2K Paris Hilton come Girls Next Door wonder of workout fashion. All through various fashion forums and Reddit threads that tell you who, what, where you can buy it of course being the wondrous adornments of characters on binge-worthy television shows about teens doing horrific things that, let's face it, we probably all did in our long lost youth. It was through trolling through these Reddit threads and forums that I found that Maddie's workout set was not actually from the Louis Vuitton store. It had been custom made by the designer of the beautiful fever dream that is the Euphoria costume department. With this knowledge, I went down another and probably much more ethically questionable internet rabbit hole. My goal was finding a fabric that would work for this set, and my heart was very much set on that rainbow printed LV monogram so loved in my teens. When I found the fabric on the 5th page of Google, I ordered 2 different versions, a black and a white version. Now I ordered the white version from a store that stocked a pre-made print of the fabric, and then I ordered a black version that I had custom printed via Spoonflower. By the way, Spoonflower does ask if you have the rights to own the image when you buy the custom printed fabric. You better believe that I pressed yes, I do have the rights to own this image. We are now not even 3 minutes into the video and I am -1 ethics point on the ethics point counter. Once the fabric arrived, it sat in my fabric drawer for months and months and months because after a while I realized that I didn't really have enough fabric to create a workout set. Also found that the fabric was pretty see-through, and then I realized that if I actually wanted to work out in this workout set, my sweat would eventually ruin the white fabric, and the white fabric was kind of the point. The black fabric that I had printed, I did with a really bad quality photo that I found online, so it didn't actually look that good, and it was mostly for mock-up purposes. Also, Lycra is expensive. Then I realized that something really cool that I could make with this fabric was some very ethically questionable lingerie. First, I made a mock-up using my equally ethically questionable but slightly less nice fabric, this being the black fabric. To make my pattern, I traced around a pair of underwear that fit me really well. Then I straightened out my line work using a ruler. I divided the pattern in half and I cut out 2 pieces of the fabric on the fold. Then I sewed them together using a French seam on a zigzag stitch setting. If you're in any way familiar with my channel, you'll know that I'm a little bit of a bull at a gate type. Maybe it's the rising Taurus in my, what do you call that? Star sign? That's the one. This means I typically do not make mock-ups. I usually raw dog my sewing as much as I possibly can because what's life without a little bit of risk? But in this case, because I really liked and had very expensive fabric for the final look, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to risk things. And this was great because the mock-up solved for one problem, which was a pretty big problem, and that was the fact that even though I was using stretchy fabric, I didn't account for the amount of stretch you need to provide in a pattern if you're tracing around a piece of already finished underwear. So my original pattern did not include seam allowance, and I now know that I have to, if I ever reuse that pattern, I need to add a 1-inch seam allowance around everything. I tried the first pair of black underwear on and realized that they were giving me extreme VPL. Now, when it came to making this entire lingerie set, I experimented with a few different patterns. I used a commercially purchased pattern for the bra. I created the pattern from my measurements for the garter belt. For the underwear, as I explained, I traced around a piece of already made clothing. I think that means I need to minus myself at least 1 ethics point on the ethics meter for using somebody's already created IP for the underwear and not paying them for it. If I'm recycling without purchasing new things, do I get to slide up a little on the ethics counter? Ultimately, at some point, I'm stealing someone's IP. Then it was time for the real fabric. To sew the final piece of underwear together, I used a French seam. So a French seam works by sewing everything with the right side facing out, which sounds counterintuitive, but then you flip everything inside out and you sew your final seams with the fabric inside out the way you normally would, and this means that the French seam is tucked inside a nice little house that it can live in and, you know, not fray in. It's good to give your seams a home. Because I was working with stretch fabric, I had my machine set to a zigzag stitch. I ultimately liked having a stitch length of 1 and a width of 5. I'm not really great at the technical components of sewing yet. I don't know what all the words mean. I will insert a photo here of my stitch settings for you. To finish off the underwear, I added a lingerie elastic around the edge. The way that I did this was I initially sewed with the frilly side facing down into the underwear, and then after sewing that, I would flip the underwear over so the frilly side would face up, and this would also finish my seam really nicely and prevent fraying and make everything look really neat and tidy. Next, it was time to move on to the garter belt. I'm going to give you a really quick lesson on how to take some face measurements to create your own pattern. That's what I did to create the pattern for the garter belt. I actually didn't have a predetermined design. I just had a kind of general vision of what I wanted to do. The measurements that you're going to need to take are going to be dependent on the width of your waist, hips, and then the length of how long you want the garter belt to be. And you also might want to take some other measurements depending on where different parts of your body stick out. So if your stomach were to stick out a lot further than your hips, you might want to take measurements around your stomach and keep an eye on how you're going to use those in creating the pattern. So typically what I will do is I will take a measurement around the smallest portion of my waist, and I'll bring that a little bit, my hips. I typically take it at the widest point, which isn't quite at my hip bone because my hip bones are quite a bit smaller than my thighs. Then what I'll do is I will take a measurement of the length. So from my waist to roughly where I would want the garter belt to end. And from there, what I do is I draw a mock-up of these patterns onto a piece of paper using a ruler. And then I'm going to kind of sketch in curves of where my waist sits and what it roughly looks like. You can use a mirror to reference this. What I'm also going to do is I'm actually going to divide my waist and hip measurement by 4, and I'm going to draw this pattern out with a straight line down the center, which will denote when I need to cut it on the fold for the front section or when I need to cut 2 halves for the back section to fit closures into the back. I would also draw in a 1-inch seam allowance. I like to make my seam allowances way too big so that I can do things like French seams. It makes me feel a lot more at ease, particularly if I'm making a dress that's out of like a really tight fabric. Like I made this dress out of a really stiff fabric the other day, and it is very close to not even getting on my body. Once I had sewn all 4 pieces of my garter belt together, I laid out a piece of fusible interfacing about 3 inches wide over the top of the garter belt, and I just kind of traced around it. Then I ironed this to each front center edge, and this would basically work to create something a little bit stiffer at the front to help add my eventual grommets into. Then I folded this over about 1 inch twice. I folded it twice, and the total cost of fabric was 1 inch. Wow. And I ironed this in place for sewing. I also made a mistake in my draft. So remember how I said when I was giving you a little lesson in how to do your measurements that I said add a 1-inch seam allowance? So that is correct, but I forgot to do that when I was creating this garter belt. What happened was that with all of the folding and interfacing and French seaming, I lost a ton of fabric and I had to go and add an extra center panel in. But this mistake worked out really well because then I had a backing for the eventual ribbon that I would put through. So once I had sewn the whole garter belt together and placed a zip in the back, I popped it onto my mannequin so I could test out what it looked like as a whole, and I decided to cut it down a little bit shorter. Here is where I'm up to with the ethically questionable lingerie. I have put a fabric interfacing behind this section, sewn this here. What I will be doing is getting my awl and putting holes in here, and then adding some cord to the front to pull everything together and make it tight. I'm also going to add a bunch of boning. Apparently, is that a hole? No, that's just print. I've also stitched this the wrong way. Now, if I spin her around, you can see all the things that I have done upside down. So that's, you know, sad. I had limited amount of this fabric and I have messed up, so it's very cool. Not really. So I put a zipper in, and this zipper unclasps at the bottom so you can fully take it off at the back and just zip it up for easy on and off, which I think is a good design. What I need to do here is I need to organize how I want the front to sit. I think I just want to measure like a kind of V shape down here, probably at this yellow star point in the pattern, and like curve it down so it's sort of even and gives like a fun, nice little hourglass shape. As far as everything else, I'm still working on the bra. Bras are really hard to make when you want to put padding in them apparently, so that's been fun to figure out. I have finished the underwear. It's the one thing I finished. Check it. I'm just showing you guys my knickers, it's fine. I put copper dye in my hair, like copper shampoo, and it looks cool now, but 2 days ago it looked really rank. They fit really well and they're really comfy. I didn't add a gusset because I just don't have any extra fabric that would work for a gusset right now. I've got no like stretch cottons or plain lycras that wouldn't be see-through under this, so yeah. In general, it is advised to add a gusset, but you can get away without it. As long as you're not planning on wearing these underwear by themselves, in which case they would probably be quite see-through. So if you are following this tutorial and thinking maybe I'll make swimwear, add a gusset. And now for the final and honestly most difficult and confusing part of this entire project. That was making the bra. I'd never attempted to make a bra. This was my first time. So for this, I did use a commercial pattern that I purchased from Etsy. To make a bra, you need quite a few notions. You need a hook and eye back. You need some kind of elastic, typically picot or lingerie elastic, to create the bra straps. I used the remainders of my lingerie elastic, but I wouldn't recommend doing this because it was a little bit thin and I think it's going to lose elastic quite fast. So I might redo these straps eventually. Then you need underwire in your cup size. And unfortunately, I bought most of my notions from Amazon, which means I am sliding down that ethics scale. Actually, I might be able to slide up on that ethics meter a little bit because my underwire wasn't purchased from Amazon. It was ripped from an old bra that was falling apart that I wanted to recycle, which I think is smart and cool. I then sewed the underwire casing to the bra using a straight stitch, but I would recommend that you also pin in any padding and your lining as you're doing this and you get it all sort of hooked up in one neat little package, which I didn't really get. The inside of my bra is a little bit of a mess, but it does work, provides support, and looks nice on the outside. Ultimately, my padding is kind of the problem that I need to redo because it ended up a little bit lefty-loosey and not exactly righty-tighty. Hello, okay, I'm gonna show you guys where I'm up to with this brassiere. I think I'm gonna redo it because I don't think that I've actually done a particularly good job. For all intents and purposes, it kind of looks finished, but the inside with the cups is a bit of a mess, and I'm not super happy with the neatness of the stitching around the underwire casings. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to redo some of that, unpick mostly just these center sections with the padding and figure out what to do there, figure out how to maybe put a lining in to cover it up and make it look really nice and neat on the inside. And that's where, you know, that's where I'm going with that. Who would have thought that bras, a pattern piece that contains like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or 12 possibly pattern pieces. Who would have thought they'd be difficult to make? Plus padding, plus wire, plus straps, plus hooks for straps, plus closures. There is a lot going on. I've just put this bra on to show you guys a little issue that I run into with this pattern. The pattern's worked out really well so far, but I'm a little asymmetric, so I've got to fix some stuff. But I printed out the 34D pattern because that is my current, almost recent measurement size. Fits really well on the front. Very cool, love it. Just a little asymmetric, and we'll change that a bit. But then we get to the back. I don't know what happened there. I don't know how one size can be like that. Was I meant to cut the back on the fold? I don't know. So I'm just going to cut a strap that will fit around my back that is the same width as this. That's how I'm going to fix that before I put the clips and closures in. Love to show you what the lingerie looks like on, but I think I have already said the word lingerie like 5 times in this video, and that is probably far too saucy for you too. You know what? I have an idea. I'll try it on over my Halloween costume from last year. See, if you find this even remotely sexual, there's literally no hope for you. How do I get this on? Oh, that's the bottom. I should know that I made this. Yes, the pumpkin beret was necessary. It's called Fashion Sweaty. Look it up. Goodbye.